Hello. So I thought we'd have a little bit of a look at how to give a rusty effect to various items. This little bottle, I've put the string around it just to make it a bit more decorative, but I absolutely love it. It's got ridges on one side, plain on the other, but you can see where the glass has been marked by time. I think it was probably, I don't know, laid somewhere for a long time next to metal objects, so the rust from the metal objects has got onto it. It's also got it's got quite an old-fashioned neck, so I think it's quite an old bottle. And also these lines aren't level, they're quite off to one side. It's got a little bit of a chip here, but I absolutely love it. I love it the more for the imperfections. If it was perfect, I probably wouldn't like it as much. But I love this effect when you see rust on glass, because glass doesn't obviously rust, it's not metallic, but when it's transferred from other objects. Some of the rust I think is inside, and I think it's possibly had metal things inside as well as on the outside. But I absolutely love it. So I want to try and recreate that effect quite quickly on some other items. I have had a little bit of a play already. We'll set that bottle aside, and I'll fetch in this jam jar. This was a bit of an experiment just to see if the technique I wanted to use would work or not. Now I don't know if you can see if I bring that up. Hopefully, I'm just trying to see if it's focusing okay. You can see the rust effect on the glass. Now if I take a paintbrush, I haven't tried this, but I don't know, I think it's fairly ingrained onto the glass. I can sort of brush it quite a bit and some comes off, but it's quite stuck. So even if I brush it quite vigorously with this paintbrush, we get a little bit of the rust is loosened, which I can probably use. But generally it's stopping put. So I could use this as a decorative jar. I have some downstairs, and the lid I've decorated with shells and things like that. That would be quite nice. But you could also put something inside. I'm just looking for something quickly to pop inside. I'll just use a book page for now. I'll just fold it in half. And then you see, obviously you just wouldn't put a book page in, but you might put an old photograph or something, or a copy of an old photograph. Don't use the original because the rust would obviously degrade the photograph, but if you copied it, it would give quite an aged look, and you could have a photograph inside and then decorate the top. I might do some jars with decorated tops with rusty bits on metal instead of seashells. So the little bit of rust that's come away, I'm going to use that. What I did to set off with, I had my little jar. This is a plastic jar, so it also works on some plastics. And you'll see it's a bit warped because I caught it with my heat gun. But basically it's a plastic jar and a metal lid, which has attracted some of the rust. But inside here, I don't do this with a really good brush, is a mixture of rusting powder and vinegar. Now it had just about dried, so what I did was I put some more vinegar in so that I could move the rust from the inside of the plastic and get it into the vinegar. Basically, I'll put that straight in water so it doesn't get onto the metal. Basically, the initial thing was I tipped quite a lot of this rusting powder, which is by PaperArtsy, Just put its top in and then I can show you. PaperArtsy Rusting Powder. It works better with an acid to activate it. It says on the bottle, sprinkle on wet glue and spritz with water. I find it does actually adhere to quite a lot of things without the glue, but if you want it to be more permanent, put your wet glue or your medium, your gel medium, matte medium, whatever, where you want it. Sprinkle it on quite a lot. Make sure it's covered. Tap the excess away just to make sure it's covered, and then reapply if they've got spaces. Then leave the glue to dry. I prefer to leave the glue to dry. Then once it's dry, I spritz it with white vinegar. You can use any vinegar or you can use lemon juice. I am going to do a comparison mixing with lemon juice as opposed to vinegar, because vinegar does smell quite a lot. I don't mind the smell of it, but some people might. So you can use lemon juice, sorry. But it's basically, it acts faster with an acid. You don't get instant results. I find leaving it overnight works best, because then it's got chance for the acid to react. It does start to react within a very short time, but for better results I tend to leave it overnight. So I'm going to put some more. I've got vinegar in this little jar, and then I'm putting, you get a lot of the rusting powder but not a great deal of cash, so I put quite a lot in there, and I'm mixing it with the vinegar. I'm just using a wooden stirring lolly stick. Now, because I've had rusting powder and vinegar in here before and for quite a long time, you would see there's rust all the way around the inside of the plastic jar. I'm just scraping some of that off to mix in, just because then we'll get a bit better effect. Straight away you'll see the actual rust. You can see it on the lid here. It's absolutely glorious. So this is my little dispenser for my vinegar. It looks orange because there was a little bit of the rusting powder got into it and I tipped it into there, but it's fine. This is a valve. I think my husband said it's a radio valve. I have a whole box full that I got from a friend. He's an antique dealer, but he specialises in vintage and quirky items, and I got a whole box full of these. So there's all different sizes and shapes. Some you can see the inside, some are coated with silver, but you can actually rub some of the silver off if you want. This is quite a small one. I'll show you this. This is another radio valve. I used that one with the prongs upright and the pointy bit downwards. But that's the sort of thing you can do with them. You can use in assemblage. So I'll just put that back over there. So I'm just going to gather up a little bit of the rusty liquid in here, the rusty vinegar and rusting powder. What I also might do is I might gather a bit off the lid that's already rusted. So I've got quite a bit here, and I don't actually know, my husband would be able to tell me what sort of metal this is. I'm not sure. It could be aluminium, it could be steel, I really don't know. And it might be that if I just sprayed it with vinegar or lemon juice, it would rust. I'm not sure. So because I want it to rust, I'm going to just dab the rusting powder mixed with the vinegar all over the metal bit. Now that bit's plastic, I think, or Bakelite or something. I'm going to put it onto all these pointy bits. They've probably got a technical name, but I don't know what it is. I'm also then going to let it, I'm applying it with this cotton bud because you get a little bit more of a random effect rather than a straight line. So I'm also going to pop some just on the top and let it run down. I don't want it even, so I'm letting it run down one area more than others. And you can see it's already starting to react, it's already going that nice rusty colour. It's gathering around the bottom. So what I'll do, I will let this sit for quite a long time without moving it so that it reacts and goes rusty where I want it to. And we should get some of the rust effect also on the glass. I keep just dabbing a bit more on in the hope that it's sort of drying and rusting. Just trying to splatter a bit as well. Ah, yes. That might work. See if I can get it to run down that side as well. That's it. Right, so you can see this is starting to react and starting to go a nice rusty colour, and it will hopefully eventually go the colour that's in this lid. That's it. Right, I'm going to step away and leave it now and let it do its thing. But I've got plenty more rusting powder and vinegar in there. You do need it in an airtight jar. This isn't quite airtight enough, and because it's got rust on it, does tend to stick a little bit. But it's fine. I'll get a better jar to keep it in later. So I'll let that dry, do its thing, and then we'll come back and you'll be able to see how it's worked. Right, so we're back. I'll just move those out of the way for a moment and then I can show you those. I'll put this paper down, it'll possibly be easier to see. We've got a lovely, lovely rusty effect on the top here, but it's also got little bits of steel showing through, because I'm presuming the rusting powder is just a metal powder of some description. It's run down, which I wanted, which looks absolutely brilliant. It's also coloured all the metal. Now it might have made the metal go a little bit rusty as well, but that's just a bonus. But it's just attached itself all the way around here to the metal. Now I have coated this with something because I wanted it not to rub off, and when it's on shiny surfaces it can rub off. So I just got some DecoArt Americana decoupage. It's a decoupage glue, but it also acts as a sealer and a finish, and it's light enough that I can just dab it on with a little brush. I use this type of brush, just a fairly flat one, and rather than brushing it on, I just dabbed it on, just so that it got the rusted areas were covered. There's a little bit here where I've gone over onto the glass, but that actually doesn't matter. It's not detrimental. And all the areas on the glass that were rusted I've sealed. Now this is not what it's used for normally, this decoupage glue, but I just thought it would work, so I tried it. And I've tried rubbing it off with my fingers and it won't come off. I'm sure if you tried something a little bit more abrasive it would come off, but I'm quite happy with that because it's going to go in a piece and not really be touched. So that's the valve done. I've also, you can see my little pot of rusty goodness has developed quite a lot in the time that I've had that piece drying. It's a lovely pattern around the edge now of the pot, and I just, like I did before, scrape the bits from the outside of the plastic pot so that it goes in. Right, so I've experimented with a few other pieces as well. This is just grey board. Now I'll lift it up and hopefully you can see a bit better. The nice rusty look to it. Now it started out as just grey board. It's coated on one side black and just obviously grey on the other. It's not very thick. That doesn't bother me. And all I did was the same principle I did before. I actually prefer the grey side. And I just applied it all over. Quite a reasonable coat with my cotton bud. And then I just let it dry. I've got any little bits like that where my fingers are. Let's put a bit more on. It does warp slightly. Let's get rid of the bubble. I'm not particularly bothered about that. Once it tends to soak in, so that's why it warps the grey board. I wasn't bothered. So I set that aside to dry, and you can see as it's drying, you're getting the rusty bits and the grey bits. You could actually do another coat. Just to intensify it a little bit. And if you were doing the black side, you would do exactly the same. Don't brush it on, just dab it on. You get a better effect. So that's the grey board. Now these are quite small, but hopefully you'll be able to see them. Get hold of them. These are, this is a little MDF star. They're from Samantha Kane. They come in a pack. And there's different sizes. That's the largest in the pack, I think. There's about 5 sizes in a pack. Because they're laser cut MDF, they've got this dark edge already, which is a bonus. There is also these numbers. They are from the works. They're in a pack. They aren't MDF, and they are a lot more brittle. So you've got to be a bit careful with sort of the little bits. But I've done the same thing with the star and the number. So you can see, hopefully, there's the finished, well, nearly finished star and the number. So I did the same. Hold of the star, my cotton bud, and it does pool on the MDF, but it does also soak in a little. But because you put quite a lot on, it sort of pools in areas as well. These aren't quite as good. The MDF works better. The little numbers took quite a few coats to get the same effect as I did on the MDF. But if you do quite a lot at once, they also like to hang on to the cotton bud. Then you can do quite a lot and it just sort of builds up. If you get really impatient, you can blast them with a heat gun, but it's actually better to let it soak in itself. So I'll put my little cotton buds away for the moment. These two are nearly dry, the 8 and the other star, and actually this is dry because that's my first one. Those are my first ones. So I did exactly the same thing as I did with the valve. I gave them a coat of the DecoArt decoupage glue. I think I'll keep them on here, and then it just, they show up a little bit better on here, I think. I'm just going to give them one final touch. They look perfectly alright like that, but you could just give them this one final touch. This is Prima Arc Alchemy metallic wax, brushed iron. It's one of Finnabar's products. Just got a little tiny bit, well, more than a little tiny bit, on my finger. We'll do the grey board piece first. I have sealed this with the decoupage glue. And then I'm just going to highlight the edges. I'll do the back as well. Don't know. Might just go around the edges on the back. Hopefully you could see this. On the grey board pieces as well, don't forget to do the edges, otherwise they just show up as plain. Yeah, I quite like that, just a little bit, not so much. Yeah, I like that, and I like that. We'll do the star the same. Don't overdo the wax, or else you will cover the rust. And as I say, with the numbers, you've got to be a little bit more careful because they are more fragile. I much prefer Sam's MDF numbers. They're much sturdier. This one's dry. Now this one I haven't sealed as yet. And as you can see, it's bowed a little. So I think I'll just go over it. Just around the edges. And when you haven't sealed it, you do brush a little bit of the rust off. So they are better sealed, but I just thought I'd do that one so you could see what it looks like. Very silver fingers now. Yeah, everything else is drying nicely, so I'll be able to do the other numbers and everything later. So hopefully you should be able to see. Just stand up a little bit and then I can see if you can see. So hopefully you should be able to see those. And this one, which is just the rusty one, would look nice with the letters mounted onto it. I haven't done the number 2, but something like 23 mounted on there would look nice. It would just look, take that off and then it doesn't, then it would just put the 3. It's subtle, but it's just enough. You could also just do the star on the grey board. Looks rather nice. Like that. So it looks like rusted metal, but it's actually grey board and MDF. And again, if the stars were smaller, you could put the star onto there, or the numbers. I think the numbers are just too big, yeah. But anyway, you get the idea. I hope you can get the rusting powder. It's getting a little bit more difficult to get hold of, but it's great fun to play with, and you get some lovely vintage effects. So I hope you give that a go and get as nice effects as I have. Right, so I thought we'd do something with our little pieces that we've made with the rusting powder. I've stuck the MDF star onto the grey board, little square. As you can see, it looks really good. These are still drying slightly. I've also stuck the numbers onto the grey board oblong, and I've stuck it onto the black side. Hopefully these won't fall off. That's the rusty side, but I quite like the black side with the rusted numbers. They're 2, 3, 8. So I've set those aside to dry. I've got this little vintage fuse that I managed to find at a friend's antique business. He has all sorts of bits and pieces, and these were in a little metal tin. So I quite like that. This is just an offcut of wood. My husband restores railway carriages from the 1930s, and sometimes they use a little bit more modern items. I think this is plywood, not sure, not a wood expert. And they only use them in the bits that don't show, sort of inside walls and things like that. So that's an offcut from one of those. I've got some of my infusions dyed kitchen roll. There is a video on my channel about creating this. I'll try and remember to put the link in the description. And I thought that would look quite nice if I put it onto the wood. A little bit of the wood grain might show through, and then these on the top. But we'll see how we progress with that. I'm going to use decoupage glue. Just wondering if the other one would be better. The other one. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll use the decoupage glue, the napkin one. That one's for paper. So I'll use the napkin one, I think. Give it a good shake. Getting quite low on this. And some of this will soak into the wood because the wood isn't treated. But hopefully enough should sit on the top to adhere the napkin. So let's choose our place. I quite like, move that out of the way, this corner. So we've got a little bit of pale and we've got a little bit of dark. And then I'm just gonna, now I don't mind wrinkles because it adds more texture. And as I thought, the glue has soaked into the wood, but if I add enough on the top, it should soak through and seal it. As I say, I like the wrinkles, I like the texture of the wrinkles. So they will get the wood effect showing through, but it'll look a little bit more like sort of distressed, not quite so new wood, as it were. I'll just give that a quick blast. What I'm going to do is take it onto the back as well. It's nearly dry. Well, it's quite wet, but anyway. I don't mind if it comes off a little bit in places. I might actually distress it a little bit. So I'll put it onto its face. A bit more glue. I'll go down the sides with the glue as well, hopefully. This will be the back, so it won't show as much, so it won't be as important. Don't normally cut tissue, I normally tear it. But for this, I think we'll just cut little areas. This will probably have stuck to the bench by the time we get to the front again, but we'll see. Right, let's see if we can just get that bit torn a little bit. I'll go up with that bit. As I say, this is the back, so it doesn't matter quite as much. That a quick blast. See if we stuck it to the bench. No, I haven't stuck it to the bench. Looks quite weathered and worn. And I don't mind if little bits come off here and there. It'll add to the distressed look. a mess on the back, but a bit more glue and that will sort that out. I've got a little patch there where it's come off. I know it's the back, but I liked it to look reasonable. And sometimes you end up using the back rather than the front. Right, I'm going to stand that somewhere to dry, and then we'll come back and decide which side we'll use. I quite like, at the moment, I like the front side as intended, but we'll see. We might even put another layer on. In fact, quite like the multiple layers. Yeah, I'll put another layer on. More glue on. Don't want that red bit. Right, so there we are. So we'll let that dry. Right, so I've got it just about dry, I think. Quite like that side, but I do think I prefer this side. I've just given it a quick sand on the edges with a sanding block. I could do it a little bit more, but we'll see how it ends up. So it's quite distressed. There's quite a lot of texture in there because of the wrinkles in the tissue, but I think I want to change it a little bit more. So I've got some Niagara Falls PaperArtsy Fresco Finish paint. Need to give it a really good shake because I haven't used it for a while. Just going to put a little bit on my glass mat. That's probably way too much. And then I'm going to brayer it out with my very squeaky, as somebody said, brayer. And I'm just going to give it a couple of swipes. Yeah, I think that's about enough. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that's it. Just going to go on the edges a little bit. That's it. Alright. Now, what I want it to look like chippy paint. So I'll go the top and the bottom. And see if I can manage to do the sides as well. That's that. One more. Just on the sides there. Right. Yeah, I think that looks quite good. So I'm going to mop this paint up. I don't want to lose that, so I've got some scrap paper. I'll just mop that up. That's quite a nice combination, the lilac and the Niagara Falls. Right, so our chippy background is dry. I'm just going to sand off a few little bits. Stray bits. I didn't do the back. I could do the back if I wanted, but I didn't. That's it. I think that's about right. I've braided this spare paint just onto here, just to clean my brayer a little bit, but also it gives me start with another background. So we've got, let's see, I think we'll have it that way. I don't know, this way maybe. Yeah, quite like that way. Just going to measure it. I'm just wondering if it's equal all the way around. Yeah, it is. I think I like that way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount that at the top. this at the bottom and our little fuse in the middle. I was thinking I wanted that attached with wire, but I'm not very proficient at drilling holes through things, and husband isn't here, so I think I'll just have to glue it on with heavy gel medium. I'll just do it by eye, but I think that will do. So we've got our rusty elements that look like metal that's rusted, our vintage item and a bit of scrap wood, infusions dyed tissue and a bit of PaperArtsy paint, and I think that looks really nice. I'm really pleased with that. Right, so I thought I'd give you a bit closer look at this, and I'll try and angle it so you can see the metallic wax shining, but also the rust as well. It's all glued on, and it's got a nice chippy paint feel, the edges, and the back is actually quite nice as well. The tissue's gone round onto the back, and it was quite distressed before, but it's nice as well. You can see how big it is on the size of my hand. So that's the finished piece. We have the finished valve, which I've yet to do anything with, but is very interesting. And I did actually, if I can find it, hang on a minute, I poured some of the rusting liquid, as I call it now. See if we go a bit further down, I might get less reflection. It was the metal powder, the rusting powder and the vinegar out of my little mixing pot. I poured it into the inside of this little glass bottle. It's got a cork stopper which has now got rust on it. I poured it in and then left it uncorked for quite a while. I'm hoping you can see the different areas in it of the wax and everything else. The rust I mean, and everything else. And then once it was dry I put the cork in. So that's quite an interesting, just trying to see if I can just get the shine off it so you can see it a little bit better. Ah, that's maybe better. So you get the greys of the metal rusting powder, but you also get the nice rust as well. So it's a little bit reminiscent of the bottle that I liked the look of. So hopefully we've got, if anything, it's a stronger look, but I do like it. So I hope you enjoyed seeing me create that.